Welcome back, everyone, to the After Action Reset. I am your humble host, Steve. A little bit about myself until everyone starts to get to know me a little bit more. Again, coming from my experiences as a Marine Corps Force Recon, current law enforcement officer, husband, father of 3 gorgeous daughters, and I've been married for just over 20 years. And someone who honestly spent a long time thinking I just needed to push a little bit harder, when the reality was my system has never or was never really turned off. If you've ever felt like your mind won't slow down and like you're always scanning, always thinking, always on, or like you can't relax even when everything around you says you should relax, you are in the right place. So let's get to work. There's a moment that most people don't talk about because on the surface, it doesn't look like anything. As I said in the previous episode, this can apply to multiple different scenarios, but for this one, let's just keep it simple. You're sitting in your house. Everything is fine. No immediate stress is present, no threat, and I'm not talking about chaos. Your family is around you. The TV might be on, as we would call it, normal life. And yet you can't settle. You're not panicking, you're not spiraling, but there's this low-level tension that never fully leaves. Your brain is still moving, running scenarios, thinking ahead, replaying things that already happened. You might not even realize you're doing it because it's been like that for so long. It feels normal. And here's the part that confuses a lot of people, including myself at one point in time. You can function like that for an extremely long time. You can go to work, you can handle responsibility, you can show up for your family, you can even look calm, but internally, you've never fully switched off. And that's the part most people don't understand. Because when people think something is wrong, they expect it to look obvious. They expect breakdowns, meltdowns, something dramatic. But most of the time, it doesn't look like that. It looks like control. It looks like someone who has everything handled, someone who's disciplined, someone who doesn't get rattled easily. And in a lot of ways, that is true. But what they don't see is what it takes to maintain that. The constant internal pressure. The effort it takes just to stay level. The fact that even when nothing is happening, your system doesn't trust that. So it stays ready. And here's where we need to start separating something that gets mixed up all the time. Being capable and being regulated. These are not the same thing. You can be extremely capable, highly disciplined, reliable under pressure, and still be completely dysregulated underneath it. That's the part that people mess up quite often. Because capability hides the problem. It convinces you, if I'm getting things done, I must be fine. I told you what fine means in episode number 1, right? Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, right? So just remember that. You're not fine. You are functional. And those are 2 very different things. So I've worked with and been around enough people over the years in the military, law enforcement, and outside of it to tell you this with complete certainty. Some of the most squared away people you'll ever meet are running systems that are completely maxed out. They don't fall apart in public. They don't complain. They don't ask for help. They just keep going until eventually something gives. And sometimes it's not even something obvious. It's snapping over small things, pulling away from people. We would call that potentially isolation, right? Or disassociating. Drinking more than you planned. Not being able to shut your brain off at night. Little cracks. Not enough to necessarily stop you, but enough to start changing you. And if you're not paying attention, those small cracks become your baseline or your new homeostasis, if that makes sense. Now, here's where I'll add something most people won't say out loud. There's a part of you that doesn't want to turn it off because being on has actual benefits. It makes you sharp, aware, prepared. You notice things other people might not. You react faster. You stay ahead. And when you've lived in environments where that actually matters, you don't just let that go easily. You hold on to it because somewhere in your mind, that level of awareness equals safety. And that's not irrational if you think about it. It's learned. The problem is your system doesn't always recognize when it's safe to actually stand down. So instead of turning off, it just stays engaged all of the time. Now, let me give you a simple way to think about this. Imagine your nervous system has two primary settings, on and off. When it's working correctly, you move between those states depending on what's happening around you. Stress comes in, the system turns on. Threat passes, system turns off. Simple, right? But when you've been exposed to enough stress, pressure, or high stakes environments, that system starts to change. The on switch becomes easier to trigger, and the off switch, it gets harder to find. Eventually, you stop cycling between those two, and you just stay on. Not at full intensity all the time, but never fully off either. And that's where people start saying things like, I just can't relax. I don't know how to shut my brain off. I feel like I'm always on edge. That's not a personality issue, and that's definitely not weakness. That's a system that has adapted over time to survive and never actually recalibrate. And here's the part I want you to hear clearly. You're not broken. You're stuck. Stuck in a pattern that used to serve you, but now it's starting to cost you. Costing you your patience, your presence, your ability to actually enjoy the life you've built. And if you don't understand what's happening, you'll keep trying to fix it the wrong way. You'll try to push harder, stay busier, control more. And all that does is keep the system running. So before we talk about fixing anything, we have to understand what we're dealing with. Because if you misidentify the problem, you'll keep applying the wrong solution. And that's exactly what most people do. So now that we've established what it feels like, we need to understand what's actually happening underneath it. Because if you don't understand the mechanism, you'll keep trying to fix the symptom. And that's where most people get stuck. They try to manage the irritability, the sleep, the overthinking, the drinking, without understanding what's driving all of it, what is behind it. So let's strip this down. Not complicated terminology, because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a complicated person, right? All this stuff is from my personal experiences, what I've learned over the course of my last 46 years on this planet. So let's just keep it simple. No textbook explanations here. Just, in my opinion, what actually matters. Your body has a system designed to keep you alive. At its core, it is very, very simple. When something feels like a threat, your system activates. Heart rate goes up, breathing changes, focus sharpens, muscles tense, right? These are the physiological responses. Everything shifts towards one goal. You know what that is. Survive what's in front of you right now. And when the threat is gone, your system is supposed to come back down. Your heart rate is supposed to slow. Your breathing returns to normal. Your muscles relax. And your mind settles down. That's what off is supposed to feel like. But herein lies the problem. If you spend enough time in environments where you have to stay alert, mistakes have consequences, you can't afford to be caught off guard, your system adapts. It gets better at turning on quickly. That's a good thing. That's what makes you effective. I get it. And that's what keeps you alive. But adaptation doesn't come with an automatic reset. Your system doesn't just say, all right, we're done now. Let's get back to normal. It learns. And what it learns is this. Being on equals safety. So instead of turning off, it stays ready. And over time, that readiness becomes your baseline. not because you chose it, because your system decided it was necessary. Now, let's take this one level deeper. There are two parts of your system that matter here. One is fast, automatic, reactive. The other is slower, logical, deliberate. Most people live thinking they are in control through the logical side. But when your system is activated, the reactive side takes over. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't check with your rational brain. It moves first. And then your thinking brain tries to actually catch up to it. This is why you can say things like, I don't know why I reacted like that. I knew it wasn't a big deal, but I couldn't stop it. I shouldn't have snapped like that. That's not a character flaw or a defect. That's a system that's firing faster than your logical side can keep up with. Now, here's where high-functioning people get into trouble. Because you're disciplined, you can override some of that behavior. You can hold it together externally. You can keep your tone controlled. You can stay composed. You can avoid blowing up. But internally, the system is still firing. You're just containing it. That's not regulation. That is called suppression. And suppression takes energy, a lot of it, which is why you feel exhausted, even when you haven't physically done much. How many of you out there can relate to that? You're not tired necessarily from being active. You're tired from containment, trying to keep everything in, from holding your system in check all day, from constantly managing your responses. And eventually, that gets harder and harder. Not because you're getting weaker, because your system is getting overloaded. Now, let's talk about something that most people don't connect to this, but it plays a huge role: your ability to relax. If your system is used to being on, relaxing doesn't feel natural. It feels uncomfortable, even when you want it. You sit down to rest and your mind starts moving. You try to go to sleep and your brain starts replaying things. You finally get a quiet moment, and instead of enjoying it, you feel restless. That's not because you don't know how to relax. It's because your system doesn't trust it yet. It's been trained that stillness equals vulnerability. So it fills the space with thoughts, with tension, with background noise. Now here's where people make another mistake. They try to force relaxation. They say, I just need to calm down. I just need to stop thinking. I just need to relax. And when it doesn't work, they get frustrated, obviously. Which does what? Activates the system again. So now you're stressed about being stressed. That's a losing cycle. Now let's bring alcohol into this, because this is where a lot of people start trying to solve the problem. Alcohol actually works at first. It slows things down, takes the edge off, dulls the noise. And for a moment, you feel what off is supposed to feel like, which is why it becomes appealing. Not because you want to escape your life, but because you want relief from your system. But here's the trade-off most people don't fully understand. Alcohol doesn't regulate your system. It shuts it down temporarily. And when it wears off, your system rebounds or reboots, so to speak, often stronger than before, which is the feeling after maybe some people drank too much: guilt, shame, remorse, things like that, right? It comes back even stronger. So what happens exactly? You feel more tension the next day, more irritability, more restlessness, which makes you more likely to use it again. And now you're stuck in that vicious loop, not because you lack discipline, because you found something that gives you temporary access to your state the system can't reach on its own right now, right? It gives you that temporary reprieve. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying to fight it at the surface level, which ultimately doesn't work. Because the issue isn't your behavior, it's your baseline. You're operating from a system that's calibrated for, what do we call it again? Survival, not for normal life. And until we start addressing that calibration, everything else is just management, temporary, and eventually unsustainable. So now that you have an understanding what's actually happening, the real question becomes, what do you do about it? So now we've got the picture. You're not broken, you're definitely not weak, and you're not lacking discipline. You're running on a system that adapted to survive and never actually learned to power down. So the question isn't, how do I fix myself? The real question is, how do I retrain the system? Because this isn't about motivation. It's not about saying the right words. Not necessarily right now. There is a huge benefit and ideology behind positive affirmations. We'll get into that during later episodes. This isn't necessarily about reading the right book, although reading does help increase emotional intelligence, and those are things that we do want in order to improve, or listening to the right podcast. These things definitely come later. Right now, we're talking about the immediate. You don't think your way out of this. You train your way out of it. And the mistakes most people make is trying to go from 100 to 0. They want to go from always on to completely relaxed. That doesn't work because your system doesn't trust that jump. So instead, we build a bridge. We don't force off. We teach our systems how to take a step down gradually, consistently. And it starts with something simple, but most people ignore it. You have to create controlled moments of safety. Not theoretical, not in your head, physical, real. Because your system doesn't respond to logic. It responds to experience. So here's where we start. Number 1, the 10-minute reset. And this doesn't necessarily have to be 10 minutes. I'm just calling it 10 minutes for simplicity's sake. You can start out with smaller timed intervals if that's what you need. You don't need an hour. You don't need a retreat for an entire weekend. You don't need to disappear for the rest of your life. You need 10 minutes alone. No phone, no input. And before you roll your eyes and think, yeah, I've tried that. No, you've sat there. That is different. This is structured. You sit down and you pay attention to one thing, your breathing. Not in some complicated way. Just slow it down. Long inhale, long exhale. And here's what matters. Your system will fight it. Your brain will start moving. Maybe you'll even begin to feel restless. You'll want to get up. That's the signal. That's how you know your system is overactive. And instead of reacting to that, you stay. You let your system realize nothing bad is happening. That's the beginning of retraining. That is training your brain. Our brains have what's called neuroplasticity, meaning if you can think in terms of a large open field of grass and 100 people or even one person starts walking the same trail every single day, over time a path is created, right? That is our system being overloaded. Eventually there's a trail. But if you stop taking that trail and start eventually walking a different path every day for an extended period of time, you'll build a new path. Our brain is highly capable of building these new pathways. And let me go back to the breathing. I started with just long inhale, long exhale. We'll get into it in later exercises and maybe I'll even demonstrate it. But there are numerous breathing techniques out there. Box breathing. There's 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 second out, 4 second hold, so on and so forth. There's 4, 7, 8 breathing, 4 seconds in, hold for 7, out for 8. There's any number of different ways you can do this. The point is, focus on your breath. Number 2, stop trying to win the day. This one hits a lot of high performers. You wake up and it's win the day. Stay productive, stay sharp, stay ahead. And that mindset works in the right environment. But when your system is already maxed out, that mentally keeps it there. So instead of asking, how do I dominate today? Try asking yourself, how do I stabilize today? That's a different game. Stabilization looks like controlled pace, intentional breaks, not reacting to everything immediately. It's not weakness, it's recalibration. Number 3, your body has to move. You cannot think your way out of a physical state. You have to move. Not destroy yourself in the gym, not punish your body, but controlled movement. Walking, lifting, zone 2 cardio. Why? Because movement burns off activation. It gives your system somewhere to put that energy instead of holding it internally. And this is where I'll add something very simple. If you're sitting all day and your system is still running hot, you're just storing it. And eventually it comes out somewhere. Number 4, fix your sleep first. Not your mindset, not your productivity, your sleep. Because if your system never powers down, nothing else sticks. And I'm not talking about get 8 hours and you're good. I'm talking about protecting your shutdown. Not constant stimulation before bed, no endless doom scrolling, no chaos right before you try to turn it off. You need a buffer because you're not flipping a switch, you're lowering intensity. Number 5, this is the hard one, honesty. At some point, you have to be honest about what you're using to manage your systems. For some people, it's alcohol. Been there, done that. I got the t-shirt. For others, it's work. I got the t-shirt. Control. I got the t-shirt. Isolation. Been there. And listen, I'm not coming at this from a place of judgment. I am the last person in the world. I will never judge anyone. Or at least I try my best not to. I've been there. But if you're using something to artificially create relief, you need to recognize it. Because until you do, you'll keep treating the symptom the same exact way and not the system. And nothing changes in the long term. Now here's the part most people want and also avoid. Consistency. This isn't a one-day fix. This is repetition. You don't reset your system once. You teach it over and over again what safe actually feels like. That's that neuroplasticity we were talking about, rebuilding those pathways. And eventually, it starts to believe you. Not because you told it to, because you showed it. Let me leave you with this. There's a version of you that learned how to survive under pressure. That version is still there. It's the reason you are capable. It's the reason you've handled everything you've handled. But somewhere along the way, that version took over everything. And now it's running your life. And even when it doesn't need to. This isn't about getting rid of that. That would be a mistake. This is about putting it back in its place. So it shows up when you need it and stands down when you don't. Because if you don't do that, you don't just stay on. You slowly lose access to everything you've built this life for. Your family, your peace, your ability to actually feel present. And most people don't lose that all at once. They lose it slowly, quietly, until one day they realize they've been there the whole time, but not really there. And here's the truth. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to start over. You don't need to fix who you are. You need to retrain what's been driving you. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. One step at a time. No shortcuts, no fluff, just real work that actually changes something. If this hit you, you're not the only one. Stick with me. We're going to reset this the correct way. I'll see you on the next one.